Hi friends, I welcome you all for the today's session. Today we are going to see about the important aspect of availability as part of discussion under the CIA triad. So still now we had seen the importance of confidentiality and the integrity. So today we are going to emphasize much on the availability. So what is the ultimate goal of availability means it is the main role of the availability is to timely and uninterrupted access of the resources which they are intended to access means providing the timely and uninterrupted access of resources to the authorized users. If you see previously confidentiality and integrity, they are mainly focused with the aspect of not letting unauthorized persons does not have the ability to access. That is the confidentiality which is trying to focus, and integrity is to ensure that unauthorized modifications are never going to happen on the data which is critical and essential. But coming to this availability, it is mainly focused on letting who is authorized to access the resource are always capable of accessing that critical resource. That is what we call it as availability. So so now we are discussing this availability with respect to the our organizational critical resources which we are trying to provide. Let it be, let's say, consider that we have an organization which is having a website, online website for selling some products. So when you have a website, it is definitely going to interact. A lot of end users or consumers are trying to reach your website, so they have to get the sufficient speed and access, and the load is sufficiently is going to manage by your systems, then sufficient bandwidth, and let's say some processing has to be done, sufficient processing speeds, all that infrastructure has to be maintained to achieve the availability. Let's say take another example in context of railway ticket management systems. So those systems are every time are going to be bombarded with huge amount of traffic in terms of peak hours, let's say in the ticket booking times and slots. So the IRCTC has to have the sufficient bandwidth and processing speeds to handle all sorts of customers in the peak time. That is where the availability is to focus. So availability is not letting any authorized person getting back without accessing anything. So we should not want any authorized person not able to achieve their services which they are entitled. So we always ensure that the authorized person definitely able to access the services which he is entitled to. See, moment you are trying to have the availability, lot of different malicious threats are attacking in who are in who are the main motive is to compromise the availability. They will come with a lot of scenarios like DOS attacks, which is denial of service attack. They will try to bombard a lot of huge traffic on your systems, and they will try to get make that system down such that no one is able to access the resources, and they will try to have the access disruptions. So to achieve the availability, the first and foremost important thing is having the proper infrastructure. Of course, there are some common parameters or practices which we have seen in the confidentiality and integrity, like access controls are important. But the basic thing, the more the availability perspective we are successfully able to meet when you have the proper infrastructure in terms of network capability, in terms of service, or all sort of things. As I mentioned, access controls definitely plays a important role in the achieving of the availability, right? So then you are entitled to make service happen to your rightful end users. That is where access control also plays an important role. Now, as I mentioned, like if someone want to achieve availability in their systems, in their services, in their infrastructure, they should focus on these fundamental areas. Those are access control. See, if you want certain resources has to be properly provided to authorized users, then definitely access control comes into picture. I hear one point I want to make clear. See, in security, anytime you take any time, the word authorized access, the word authorized access comes into the picture. There is a necessity to introduce access controls. And other thing, when we want to ensure the availability, we should focus on our performance. You should able to see that your system is always maintaining the acceptable speed such that it will fulfill the requirement of the authorized users. And one more important aspect is incident handling. As I am stating that security is always a thought process to ensure that reliable services are being to provide to the authorized users. Let it be in terms of confidentiality and integrity or availability. Providing services to the intended people. But the thing is, definitely, as during the course of time, people are trying to see some incidents. You always tend to hear the news like that there are certain systems have went down, like news like Facebook has went down for certain servers has gone into down, Twitter is unable to access few minutes. So these are all some incidents which make them services to be interrupted. But as a person who is trying to achieve the availability, you should have proper incident handling. Getting an incident is not a bad thing, but how your reactiveness, how quick are you are to fix that issue, how you are quickly you are going to sort out that issue is the fundamental aspect you need to understand when dealing with the availability. That is the one of the important area which we need to focus. And other key aspect which we need to focus is redundancy and backups. I am undoubtedly, I am very much sure to say that redundancy and backups plays much important role in terms of availability. Because you see, if you want to take the load of huge traffic, you need the redundant servers. If you want to have the ensure the data is always protected, you need the redundancy in data management, that is RAID. So you see, the redundancy is always important. Let it be in terms of infrastructure with respect to the servers, let it be with respect to the power input source, let it be with the network interfaces through which. So whatever your resource, let's say your resource is going to operate on certain primary components. Let's say your system is going to provide services through network, so it is your responsibility to have redundancy in network providing. Network infrastructure should be there, that Redundancy is there to support your server consistently available to the public with having dependency or use of multiple ISPs. So you want to ensure that data is never able to lost. In that case, you need to have the RAID concept has to be implemented as term as part of the backup mechanisms. Let's say there are cases where the people are trying to attack your system. Maybe see, that is not a good thing, but the security is always thought or thinking of there is a chances of going happening wrong. Then how you are able to react, that planning well ahead makes your system more stronger in terms of security. So assume that okay, someone is going to impact my system with ransomware, I may end up losing my data. So having a backup makes you better maintaining of availability in such situations. And data protection, so you always have the proper loss prevention or destruction of data such that it never going to happen. You should have that mechanisms to be in place. So now, what are the threats to availability? The major threats to availability is because of hardware or software failures. You see, any system it try to run means it need power, it need infrastructure like data backup and data storing facilities, it needs network infrastructure. So there are some dependencies on hardware, and of course there is a glitch, there is a vulnerability, there is a bug which maybe attacker may take advantage of that vulnerability. An issue in the software may also shows the impact on the availability. Not only these things, when the availability is the primary concern, you need to focus on the threats with respect to the environmental factors. There are chances like that your availability may impact due to heat, static electricity. There is a climatical change where the floods has been witnessed in the vicinity of your server locations. There is a power loss. You can't expect the natural calamity. So for all these natural disasters, you should have a backup process. How you are going to tackle these kind of unprecedented events are also one of the critical. Of course, we are discussing here. These are the some kinds of threats you should thought of to meet the availability. And as I mentioned, there could be different attacks like denial of service. People are trying to do that destruction and they want to make the communication disrupted. So these are the various threats. And one more, the last unimportant thing is human errors and misconfiguration. As I am stating that from starting onwards, security is all about people, process, technology. The people are the ultimate users of this process and technology. They have to abide to the process. Along with following the process, they have to properly implement the right technologies to ensure the availability. But let's say somewhere they are not competent enough or negligent to comprehend to the aspects of policy or technology aspects, they may end up to impact the availability. So the human error and misconfiguration is also one of the factors impacting the availability. So now what is the countermeasures to have to ensure to free from these threats which are impacting the availability? Having a proper system design. So you should have a proper system design such that reliable data delivery is going to happen to the rightful authorized user. So the design should be such a way that it can have the capacity to handle the loads such that reliable or consistent services are going to deliver to the end user. So access controls, as we discussed, they plays an important role such that rightful or authorized users are going to access the resource. So this monitoring is plays an important role such that unauthorized persons who are trying to compromise your system in terms of availability can be drastically reduced if you have the proper access control and monitoring. And another aspect is having a denial of service protection. Having proper firewall configurations, firewalls, routers, traffic monitoring. So these are the fundamental areas which we need to focus to tackle the DOS attacks. As I mentioned, redundancy and backups, they will help you to tackle the failures. So they will having a proper mechanism such that these availability issues are never going to occur. Means these availability impactful issues never going to occur if there is a proper redundancy and backup mechanisms. Having proper mechanisms to with having a good fault tolerance, right? And the BCP, the business continuity planning, is the ultimate thing. You should not having a single point of failure. So BCP is always it is a thought like, what is if something going to happen wrong, how I am going to act. That is what mainly the BCP. See, everything we thought to have, we everything we thought, we think that always good has to happen, but the BCP starts with the first thing is, what if this happens, what if there is impact on availability, how I going to address this issue. That is where the BCP process comes into the picture. So moment you thought of there could be some failure, there is a chance of failure. If failure comes, what I am going to, how I am going to sort out that issue. If that thought comes, you does not want to have a single point of failure. That is the beauty of the BCP. Business continuity planning is very important aspect. In subsequent classes we will deal much about the BCP. And it is uh, very good to know that in fact availability is somewhere depend on confidentiality and integrity. See, for example, let's say you have a critical resource. If you are having critical resource, if you are keeping more measures to ensure the confidentiality, indirectly you are reducing the availability, right? See, for example, let's say, if you let me explain the confidentiality. Let's say if you have a system and this system is holding very critical data. So moment you know that this system is holding a lot of critical data and you want to ensure the confidentiality. So how the more effective confidentiality comes, when there is a stringent access control mechanisms are there. So moment there are very stringent level of access controls are there, it will end up with losing confidentiality, right? See, let's say that this is system A which is having some data. This is having system B which is having some critical data. This is also important. This B is having more critical. So since the B is more critical, you will keep multiple boundaries to protect the critical data which is stored on the B. It indirectly makes the impact on the availability. That is what, the more you focus on the aspect of confidentiality and integrity, they will somehow impact on the more you focus on the confidentiality integrity, they will somehow impact on the availability. I'm not saying that they are, means they tend to impact. So there should be a balance how you will tackle all three aspects. So now the key aspects of availability is, it is as simple of usability, making everyone able to use very easily. They can able to learn very easily, they can able to control things easily. So availability is directly proportional to how simple it is in terms of usability. Let's say that you make wonderful systems, but they are very difficult or complex in nature to use, it may impact, right? So that is where usability is the thing. Means the ultimate goal of availability is reaching the services to authorized users. That can be achieved with having proper usability. So accessibility, you should be able to provide the broader access regarding of limitations. You should not end up, if the availability is necessary, saying that lack of poor infrastructure, lack of poor network infrastructure or power infrastructure. So you should have the broad access without any limitations. That is the fundamental idea of the availability. But this is one of the important thing is having timeliness. So everyone want to expect that delivery of critical information when they are made in the fast with having very low latency. So we expect very prompt and low latency responses from the service point of view. That is the fundamental three aspects we need to focus on the availability. That's our today's session. Again, we will meet another aspects of which are contradicting, or which are the things we want to understand when we want to deal with CIA. We have a DAD aspect, so which we'll see what is DAD, which is quietly contradictory to CIA, how they are interlinked, in the next session. Thank you.